Actually, along those lines, then, let me ask about Jankos, because obviously this was before you guys had won, and at the time he still had that whole rep of like he just chokes and he's in all the semis and he hasn't won the title, etc. Right? The thing I want to ask about with him was, I actually think when I look back now, I think everyone pushed that out. Like, obviously it was factually correct. He hadn't won LEC and he'd been in loads of semis. That is true. But if I actually look back now, because he started his career like a lot of junglers, as like, I'm like a Lee Sin fucking pop off Elise, like, oh, gank everything. That makes you think that the guy's going to be like a carry jungler their career, or it's just ganking, right? But actually, if you look at the biggest strength of his career, he is amazing at fucking setting everyone else up and protecting people and covering and being at the right spot. Like, if you actually do that as well, you're also going to have the best people around you. You are the jungler. Like, you're not really going to 1v9 the game, you know?
I mean, it sounds all cheesy, but he was the glue that held the team together, right? I think at that point in time, no other jungler in the West could have done the same thing with G2 that he did. It's not even close. From leadership to actually being also the counterbalance of personality to the Perkz, because like one funny story is after we lost the World Finals, Perkz and myself, we talked and we were like, okay, we have to be a bit more serious, right? Because we were still aloof as a team. And we went to Jankos and we said, come on, bro, like, let's try to change it, be a bit more serious during practice, right? Because he was the clan of the team. And we had the two most miserable weeks of our existence. Like, it just felt bad to go to work. It just felt bad to play. We like came back into him, like, come on, be the clown again. It's fine. We need you. And Jankos could just switch it, right? Like, he is very intelligent about how to like shift the mood in the team, I would say. If he knows his players well, and they also are open to it, because some players aren't, which also was an issue in 2021. But I mean, this guy's just a machine in game, out of game. Like, nothing but praise to Jankos. This guy, also, as you said, right? I think there's no jungler who's as resilient to being invaded as Jankos. Like, he always stays relevant. You can't really shut him out of the game. Of course, he has games where he ends, right? And goes like 0-5, whatever. Happens to every player in the world. But the way he... Like, his first instinct is, if he's behind, like, how can I help my teammates, right? Which is something that sounds very easy to do. But to even also ask the questions that lead to it, which is really important when it comes to ask the correct questions, right? It's like, where do you need me? And then the player thinks about, okay, how can I use you? And then, like, sometimes one says, come here. But sometimes Jankos even sees it himself. So this guy was really, really smart and always active. Maybe it's a sugar, I don't know. But yeah. I think, like, if you clone 5 Jankoses, like, just all the skill sets he has, besides maybe the hands, because now he's old, you probably would be like on the same level as the 219 roster.
Yeah, one thing about that as well that's weird is, obviously he's another person, like I give this example of Bad Stam League show that Mickey X is also different, because you'd think he was like super shy, like, oh, I'm not that good. It's like he thinks he's the shit, that's the joke. It's like, you know, so along these lines, right? Jankos on camera, especially in these latter years, has played up the angle that he always seems not that confident, like, oh yeah, we always lose every final 0-3, I'm old, I can't play the champ. And like, but the joke is, like, if you look how he plays, like you say, like, it seems that actually like he never gives up in the game, like he always thinks there's a way back in.
Yeah, and that was the entire roster back then as well, right? But I think him and Luca were the ones that actually drove it really hard. This whole looking for answers, right? Like, if you're behind and you ask questions about what to do in the game, your teammates don't have time to feel behind. If that makes sense,
right?
If you die,
you take their mind off it, right?
Exactly. Like, if you die, it's quiet. You're like, oh shit, we're behind, guys. What do we do? But they're like, oh, can we do this? Can we do this? And they don't even, like, this is the important part, right? Which I really appreciate about both of them, is very often they didn't say, let's do this, but they asked the question, what can we do?
Right.
Like, wonder, what can you do? So they made sure that every teammate gets included, and that's how we got to this crazy situation sometimes, right? Because you force your teammate to stay active. You don't give them a chance to feel bad about the current game state. So that's a really big quality that especially those two have. Caps to an extent as well. But I think that was also the main part, because I think if you look back, the most games we had, I mean, we were griefing a lot, right? But we were behind like 5K, 6K, 8K on the regular, and we came back, which was mostly because of just communication about what options we have. What can we do, what they don't expect, and just being active in the game and not being down.
It's also just so wild, though, because I want you to explain the relationship between those two. Because if people don't know, that wasn't a joke. Like, when they used to banter each other when they were on the other teams, they were like low-key. So it was like, they wasn't enemies, like the frenemies thing. It's like they sort of loved to banter and shit talk. And the mad thing is, I remember thinking, like, how are they going to play in a team together? But as you say, if anything, it was one of the best combos of all time. Like, they sort of, they are like different, but it works somehow, right?
Yeah. I think it just helped that, I mean, in basketball, you would say ball respects ball, right? You work with him and you see the effort they put in. So I think that bridge has been gapped really quickly between them. Also, of course, I mean, it's not no secret that Luca had like a higher understanding of macro than maybe anybody else, and Jankos probably was the one who was fastest in learning. So that's also why Jankos, let's say, became the right-hand man to Perkz, to regard, especially compared to bot lane back then. So yeah, that's also why they became such close friends. And also, of course, Perkz is someone who plays a lot with his jungler, right? So naturally, over time, if they share the same ideas, and then both as well are very, very direct, but also take it really well. So they could just like clash at each other, talk about the game, and then go out of it better than before.
Plus, just to round out the Jankos topic, to me, I think he has one of the most underrated accomplishments ever, which was when he had the back-to-back MVPs with different mid laners, when he went from Caps to Perkz. Like, mate, like, swap into a different style of mid laner. You don't just do that overnight. Like, and spoiler, both these guys privately, they all rave about this guy. I think he's the fucking best, mate.
Oh, for sure. I mean, of course, there's Diamond Procs, right? We should not be forgotten. But it's the gap between Jankos and anybody else, maybe besides him, is so big it's not even funny. Like, it's actually a disgrace if he's not like Hall of Famer first ballot, if that makes sense. I also think now that he's on a losing team, the whole right angle of is he washed up? I think it's a bit too much because, in a way, I mean, I wouldn't compare myself to Jankos in that regard, but I have the same effect is that if we get new viewers, they don't know the history. So if they go on a stream and they see is Jankos washed up, they will not know how insane this guy is and was, right? So I think while they do it for Reckless as a king of Europe or whatever, like they should show more appreciation, not because, I mean, of course it's funny and they know Jankos can take it, but I think it's also important for his legacy that people who are new to the game understand that this guy is dominating Europe for the last, 7 years, right?
Yes.
And no one came close to longevity and peak. That's the important part, right? It's not like he was good for 1 or 2 seasons. He was the best for like 7 seasons in a row. But if there was a challenger, the challenger disappeared after 1 year. Like there was no one who could consistently challenge him, right? Even close.
Yes.
So I think that's the most important part, and I think he should be celebrated for it.
Right, here's the question no one's ever asked, because G2 just did so well and won the 4 splits and won MSI and went all those well. Here's the question I have, which is an obvious one to me. It's why no one's ever asked it though. When you make a super team like that, and on paper, like all these players was fucking sick, they could all have been the best at their role, right? Obviously, we've seen many of those not work. So I always wondered, was there any time in the first split that you had?
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.